Welcome to the FanDuel Punch-Out. I'm Jason Gilbo, JGilbo11. With me is Nick Tasso at the Inefficient 2, taking a look at today's 9-game main slate. And overall, kind of your average slate. I mean, nothing really appealing about it, but not a bad one either.
Yeah, I agree with you. There's not too many standout games or standout players, but it's definitely something you can work with.
Yeah, definitely. And in this first one here, you get the Yankees and Indians in Yankee Stadium. Carlos Carrasco versus Masahiro Tanaka. And both these pitchers, I mean, obviously above average arms in a spot where they could do some damage, but I'm staying away from Tanaka. Carrasco could be an intriguing GPP option just because, you look at his last start against the Yankees, he obviously didn't do too well. But this Yankees offense is a bottom 10 team against right-handers, and Carrasco is certainly in a spot to bounce back.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I know that the Yankees have looked pretty good recently, the offense, but I still think they're not as good as everyone thinks they are. And you look at Carrasco, and he's still a pretty good pitcher, despite his couple poor performances lately. Especially his last one was really terrible. But again, that will probably push ownership really low on him, especially since it's at also Yankee Stadium. So for GPPs, I think he's really solid because you'll get him at low ownership. As for Tanaka, he looks really bad right now. His last two starts have been mediocre, so I'm staying away from him because this Cleveland offense is pretty hot.
Yeah, definitely. I think, if anything, we are going to take a look at this Indians offense and some of these guys. All kind of sit in that mid 3K range, which is still a little bit high for a price against Tanaka, but definitely something I can roll out in tournaments. I don't mind a Jason Kipnis at 3,400. I think that's a reasonable price tag, especially given all these lefties in Yankee Stadium.
Yeah, absolutely. And your favorite guy, Lonnie Chisenhall, too. He's only 2,900. So if you're looking for some cheap exposure here, you might as well go with him.
Yeah, definitely. And Tyler Nyquist, 3,300. And I mean, Napoli's red hot at 3,600. I still think there's tremendous upside with him. A lot of home run potential still for this Indians team because there is one area where Tanaka does struggle. It can be giving up the long ball at times.
Yeah, absolutely. And he's given up a lot of home runs also to righties more so than lefties. So feel confident, even if you are throwing some righties in there like Napoli, that they have a good chance to go deep.
Yeah, definitely agree. And as far as the Yankees, I mean, even though they're kind of front-loaded, I still don't find myself really using any of the top of the lineup there.
No, not at all. The only one I would consider would probably be Mark Teixeira, 2,500, or even Chase Headley. But other than that, I'm probably staying away from him.
Yeah. Twins and Rays next here. You got Menendez versus Kyle Gibson. Neither of these pitchers really on my radar for FanDuel. I'm not really looking at hitters from this game. I think it's just more of a stay away. But I do like some of the Rays prices, like a Brad Miller. I don't mind for cheap if Kiermaier's in the top of the lineup. I don't mind him at 2,600 either.
Yeah, I agree with you. Brad Miller has just been really phenomenal at home this year. It's weird to say that, but he's hit 16 of his 20 home runs at home. So, I mean, against a righty, he's been pretty good against them as well. So I think he's in a good spot here. And you could even take a flyer on Corey Dickerson only at 3,200.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, there is a lot of power upside from those lefties there. Evan Longoria, Logan Forsythe, a little too pricey for me, especially Longoria right around Manny Machado's price at third base. So I think they're just kind of the odd men out, but I definitely do like those lefties.
Yeah, absolutely. And on the other side, I just always like to play Vargas when he's in. He's still pretty cheap, and I think he always offers pretty good upside.
Yeah, definitely. And even a Max Kepler at 3,700, I mean, we've seen his upside. He's a potential guy, but obviously that price tag is much higher than it was, a week or so ago. So Twins offense, I mean, not really that much of a value appeal, just given that their big bats are priced up higher. But Vargas, definitely a good call just because there is a ton of upside, and he does sit at a lower price.
Yeah, absolutely. And another guy, too, a little bit lower down if he gets in the lineup would be Danny Santana. He's only 2,800 switch hitter, and he's just been doing a little bit of everything lately. He's getting a couple of hits in the last few games. And he still has that stolen base potential, which can really bolster his potential in the fantasy realm.
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, there are some guys in this game, but overall, you kind of do expect it to be pretty limited.
Yeah, it's not one that I'm really targeting. You have to really pick your spots here.
Yeah, definitely. Mets and Tigers next. You got Anibal Sanchez taking on Jacob deGrom. Jacob deGrom, I mean, obviously a tougher matchup for him, but he is something I think is a GPP play just because his Tigers offense can be somewhat boomer bust at times. We've seen deGrom shut down good offenses before. Tigers still have a reasonable strikeout rate, but not really a cash game guy for me.
No, yeah, I'm staying away from deGrom and cash. I think he's a good GPP play just for the same reasons that you stated. His price tag isn't too high, so I don't mind deploying him in GPPs. And like you said, this Detroit offense, they really could strike out so many times, or they could hit a few home runs, which could really mess up DeGrom's fantasy production. So it's really kind of up in the air.
Yeah, definitely. And I think as far as offense goes, I mean, I'm more inclined with taking, some guys against Anibal Sanchez, who really has not been good against, either side of the plate this season. Um, Obviously, some of these prices are very cheap. I mean, Neil Walker's been red hot, 3,100, a decent second base option. And obviously, Chris Granderson, I mean, always there's some home run potential there. But the Jay Bruce price tag at 3.8 is much more intriguing here on FanDuel.
Yeah, 3.8's kind of high for me. I don't mind him here, but he's just been so good against righties this year that I kind of got to play him if I have the salary for him.
Yeah, definitely, and there's even some kind of punt options in the back of this lineup too. I mean, if you are kind of high on the Mets, I mean, I do think they're going to put up a reasonable share of runs. You can use some guys. I mean, if you wanted to punt an outfield spot, can forward to a 2,200. I mean, it's been a while since he's done anything productive, but obviously we know that potential is there.
Yeah, absolutely. And against Anibal Sanchez, he could kind of implode at any minute, and he really hasn't looked good at all this season. So I really don't mind using righties or lefties against him.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm not sure who's back behind the dish. It could be either Rene Rivera or Travis d'Arnaud. Either one of those guys, I think, could be a reasonable punt option too.
Yeah, I agree with you there. And even keep an eye on where Kelly Johnson hits in the lineup. He's only 2,500, and lefty could kind of do some damage against Sanchez.
Yeah, definitely. And I think on the Tiger side, if there was one bat I'm willing to kind of bank on, it's probably Miguel Cabrera, 3,500. I mean, just the way he's swinging the bat. In that pricing, I mean, it's not that big of a risk. I mean, if he was up close to the 4K, maybe I just kind of fade altogether. But GPPs, I think you can kind of get him at lower ownership today.
Yeah, absolutely. Going to the ownership point, everyone's going to look at him going up against DeGrom. So typically where he would probably be at 15% or so, he might be at 10 or even 5% today. So a guy like Miguel Cabrera to get 5 or 10%, that's extremely good. And at that price tag, you kind of, I'm not saying he's a must play, but you kind of want to throw him in there in a lot of lineups and just see what happens.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's not like the Tigers' offense is projected for only 3 runs. I mean, it's still right above 4. So it's still something that you can target in GPPs and feel okay with.
Yeah, absolutely. And Miguel Cabrera has just been one of those guys who's been red hot lately.
Yeah, and there's something about him in day games. I mean, he goes off too.
Yeah, I think that was more so last year. I haven't really looked into it this year, but last year he was incredible. I'm not 100% sure on his stats this year, though.
Yeah, it's just something to toss out as kind of a fun fact.
He's like Danny Espinosa on Sundays.
Yeah, it's true.
It's weird.
Yeah, I mean, everyone kind of has their thing where, you hit well on Thursdays or you don't pitch well in day games, things like that.
Yeah, and I think Pineda being terrible on Sundays is a thing too, but I have to look into that more.
I think he's more just terrible whenever I use him.
Alrighty, so let me know next time you do then.
Yeah. Reds and Pirates next here. Garrett Cole versus Dan Straley. I like Garrett Cole quite a bit here. Big favorite against a Reds offense that they're not good on the road. They kind of enjoy their home ballpark. They're also, the loss of Jay Bruce is still a big bat missing out of that lineup. And Cole's a guy who's, pitched well in his last 3 starts. He kind of finally looks healthy. Obviously, PNC Park's going to help him out quite a bit. And he's a good cash game guy for me. I think he's kind of the guy I'll be using a ton of.
No, absolutely. I mean, we look at Cincinnati, and earlier on in the year, we were kind of a good offense, but now without Bruce, they kind of fizzled out. And Votto's still good, and you got Adam Duvall, but he struggled the past few games as well. So I'm not really too concerned with this lineup, and this game being at PNC Park, it should really favor Garrett Cole.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm not really looking at any of these Reds bats and their prices. I mean, obviously Billy Hamilton's out. They have some weird success against this starter Garrett Cole and some stolen base upside. I might take a shot with him in a GPP and kind of hope that he gets on it. And, obviously whenever he gets on, he's going to be running. So there is that potential. But outside of that, I'm just kind of staying away.
Yeah, I agree with you there. To be honest, since this game's in PNC Park, there's really not too many guys that I'm really targeting. I know Australia is Dan Straley, but he's pitched a little bit better this year. So kind of on both sides, I'm sort of staying away.
Yeah, I am too. I think Starling Marte might be the only one there at 3,700 just because he's hit righties very well this year. And he's a guy who's red hot and just seems to be kind of running free. I mean, there's been a lot of stolen bases over him over the last few games. And he's the only one really doing damage.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know Polanco might be out for this game too. So if Matt Joyce does hit 4th again, I mean, it's not the greatest thing, but hitting a cleanup hitter at only 2,600, you can do worse. So I don't mind him there.
Yeah, definitely. It's obviously a game that's pretty limited as far as offense goes, but there are a few bright spots.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd probably just, like you said, stay more with Garrett Cole and then just move on from this game.
Yeah, definitely. Giants and Nationals, Tanner Rourke versus Madison Bumgarner. And Bumgarner, obviously, after his last blow up against the Phillies, is, you know, definitely a guy who's not going to be trusted and really shouldn't be against this Washington offense who are good against left-handers. But I don't know. I mean, there could be potential for a GPP move here with Bumgarner just because um, his overall track record, I mean, strikeout rate over 25%, kind of a neutral ballpark. I could see him coming out and having a good start against his team and kind of catch a lot of people off guard.
No, absolutely. I really don't mind Madison Bumgarner here. My holdup is the price tag. 11.4 is a little bit too high to spend on him at this point after that outing he just had. But with that said, those same reasons could be why he's a great GPP play. He has a good outing and he's 5% or less owned, and you're really going to cash in on that. So, I mean, we look at this Nationals offense, and at times they're good, but at times they're really not. So I think he's in a good spot here. I do think with the addition of Trey Turner now to the team and Worth hitting lefties well, it might be a little difficult for Bumgarner in this matchup, but I still think he comes away with a pretty good outing.
Yeah, definitely. And, as those guys you mentioned, I think those guys are also GPP moves because you can, make the same case for this Nationals offense because they've been so good against lefties to go off against Bumgarner. And we've seen it happen before. I mean, we just saw it in his last start. So I'm okay with using a Turner and Worth in GPPs, even a Wilson Ramos at 2,700. I'm definitely okay with those three guys, but not cash game plays for me.
No, absolutely. This game, cash game wise, I'm probably staying away altogether just because you have Bumgarner, who should be a good pitcher, but at the same time, he could give up a few hits, and you just really don't know what to expect. On the other side, I actually don't mind Tanner Rourke against the Giants. His price tag is a little bit lower, and he's pitched well the last few starts. So I think against this Giants team, even though they are pretty much lefty heavy, I think he could navigate well against them and have a decent outing.
Yeah, see, I mean, Rourke's a guy who I don't mind. He doesn't miss a ton of bats for me. I kind of actually like the Giants' bats against him just because of their price tags. I like a Brandon Belt at 3,100. I like some of these middle of the order guys, a Buster Posey at 29, Crawford at 29. So I think for me, I'm just kind of staying away from Rourke. But overall, I think, it's just kind of a wash.
Yeah, I'm not itching to play him, but I mean, I can see why people would. The only thing with Rourke to me is every time I feel like people are on him, he has a terrible outing. So that's probably one reason to probably shy away from him.
Yeah, definitely. But overall, I think this game's probably going to be fairly low scoring. I think it's just more hit or miss.
Yeah, absolutely. And the only bad thing too, if you deploy Rourke, is Madison Bumgarner, and he could get the win very easily.
Yeah, definitely. Orioles and White Sox next here. Dylan Bundy versus James Shields. And Dylan Bundy obviously had a really cheap price tag, and I think he's going to be a very popular play today. And I even think cash game wise, people are going to jump all over him just because he's facing a White Sox team that, bottom 10 in WOBA against righties, slightly above average strikeout rate. And I'm kind of in agreement. I'm kind of in awe of what he's been doing lately in pitching in Camden Yards in a bad ballpark. I don't have a problem with him going on the road to U.S. Cellular.
Yeah, absolutely. I think he's in a pretty good spot here. The White Sox offense really isn't that good, and he's looked phenomenal, especially in his last start. So I like him here. My hesitation, though, is just going to be the ownership percentage, and if he does have a bad start, it just kind of is for me, and I'd probably want to go somewhere else.
Yeah, I mean, he's a guy who I think you could fade in GPPs just because I do think he's going to be the popular arm, especially at that price. But obviously, it is something that is a risk because if he does go off, it won't matter that he's chalky because you will be far behind and not getting that value.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I was on him the other day, and it was fun, but I don't know. In this matchup, I feel everyone's going to be on him now, and it's just one of those things. If he has a bad outing, you really don't want to be on him.
No, definitely. I mean, if you are off of him and you do roll somewhere else, I mean, you can get ahead of the curve there. So it is something to consider in GPPs.
Yeah, I mean, he does have a lot going for him going up against James Shields, so he easily could get the win, but you never know.
Yeah, definitely. And James Shields, I mean, we saw that blow up potential in the last start. And even with his 6, 7 game stretch there before, where he was pitching well, he had a really low swinging strike rate. I mean, it was right around 5, 6%. He wasn't missing any bats. And obviously, the batting average on balls in play was really low, below his career norm. So it was about time that he blew up again. And I think that kind of that case goes again with this Orioles offense.
Yeah, absolutely. Excuse me. I just think that this Orioles offense is in a good spot right here to really do some damage against them. The only bad thing is a lot of them are priced kind of high. So you kind of have to pick your spots and see what the lineup is before really making any decisions.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, if it's Jonathan Scopes scoots up to second again, I definitely don't mind him at 3K. We've seen him hit there in the past, but obviously with Kim, he could be there as well. The Jones and Trumbo price tags really aren't that bad. I'm not really looking to play Chris Davis at 3,600. I think Machado's fine if you want to pay up. Pedro Alvarez, I mean, he's been red hot. I mean, 6 homers over his last 10 games. He's a guy with a lot of potential here against Shields. And I think it's kind of a viable swerve off of Machado.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you look at this game, and a lot of people are going to just gravitate towards Machado because he hits righties so well. But like you said, Alvarez is one of those guys. He's a little bit cheaper, and he could do pretty much the same damage if he connects with a couple balls. And we know James Shields, that's his one big issue is giving up the home runs. So I really like Pedro Alvarez in this matchup.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, he has a 300 ISO this year against right-handers, but obviously a high strikeout rate. I think I'm reserving him more for GPPs, but definitely a lot of potential there.
Yeah, absolutely. If I was doing cash and I had a decision between those two, I'd go with Machado because he's a little bit more consistent. But Pedro Alvarez can kind of give you that big boom that you need to your GPP lineups.
Yeah, definitely. And anyone on the White Sox side that you were looking at?
Not really. I mean, you could kind of go with maybe Morneau because he's cheap or Adam Eaton, but there's really no point to do it in this matchup.
Yeah, I think those are the names I was looking at just because they are the price type. But overall, I'm with you. It's just kind of a stay away matchup.
Yeah, you could definitely do it if you want to be contrarian in GPP, but not really, not at all in cash.
Yeah, definitely. Rangers and Astros here. You got Yu Darvish versus Joe Musgrove, and Yu Darvish. I really like the price tag here for his upside. The one thing to mention, I mean, obviously he has yet to go over 100 pitches, and I don't think he will this year. Maybe not until later on, but he's still going to be in that 90 to 95 pitch count range. And he hasn't really been working too deep into games, but here, I mean, if he goes 5, 6 innings and kind of gets you 8, 9 strikeouts, you'll definitely take that at this price.
Yeah, absolutely. You look at you, Darvish, and when he came over, he was so good, and then he got injured, and he's sort of getting back to where he used to be early on. And I really like him in this matchup. There's just so much potential against this Houston offense for strikeouts, and he's one guy who could literally strike out almost every batter. So I like him. It's kind of hard to play him in cash games for me just because there is potential with some Houston bats. But for GPPs, I think he's probably my top option.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, you look at him this year. I mean, 34.6% strikeout rate in the starts he's done in Houston. I mean, 15th in WOBA against righties, 24% strikeout rate. So definitely a lot of potential there. And I do think that even though Vegas isn't a huge, they're not in a huge favor of one team or the other as far as getting a win, I could see Texas pulling this one out more so than the Astros.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Musgrove, he had a nice first outing. He only went 4 1/3, but it was against Toronto, who is more of a swing happy kind of team. And I think this Texas is a more balanced offense, so they might be able to hit them hard. And now that Shin-Soo Choo's back, I think they could collect a little bit more base hits and not strike out at such a high rate as the Blue Jays did.
Yeah, I could definitely see that too. I mean, there's a lot of reasonable prices on this Texas team and a lot of lefties. I don't mind even a Jonathan Lucroy, even in a righty-on-righty matchup, just because Lucroy's success against right-handers. And in that ballpark, there's a lot of potential there. And I think if I was going to pay up, I think Chu and Odor are still reasonable options.
Yeah, absolutely. And you even look at guys like Adrian Beltre, who's pretty cheap, and even Mitch Moreland. I know since the trade, he hasn't done the trade for Lucroy, he hasn't done too much. But other than that, before Lucroy came, he was really on fire, hitting in the 6 hole. So, I mean, he's only 2,800, so I don't mind him in this matchup.
Yeah, I definitely don't either. And, as far as the Houston bats go, they're just not cheap enough for me to really deploy in any sort of GPP format. And obviously, I think if they were cheaper, if they were around that 3K range, I wouldn't mind tossing in, Correa or an Altuve or something like that. But they're priced up higher in the matchup than I would want.
Yeah, obviously those guys have a lot of potential, but when they're priced that high, there's really not a need to do that. Maybe Alex Bregman, he's only 2,300. So I mean, if you got a good feeling about him, I know he started off his career really bad, but he's slowly gotten a few hits the past few games, so I don't mind him at that price.
Yeah, definitely. And the thing with these back end guys, I mean, there's a lot of guys really cheap. You look at Preston Tucker, or Colby Rasmus, or AJ Reed, whoever you want to take a look at. The problem is those guys have strikeout rates that are just insane. And it's one of those things where it's like I'm kind of itching to see what Darvish does against this back half of the line because it could be really ugly.
Yeah, absolutely. Darvish really, honestly, for his price, he could be the highest producer for fantasy points and for pitchers today, just because there is so much potential.
Yeah, definitely. Blue Jays and Royals next year. Yordano Ventura versus Marcus Stroman, and there is some rain in the forecast for the first couple hours. But we were talking before that it's late in the year. They're not going to probably hold out on this game. I think it's just going to be a delayed start and then kind of get everything going.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I mean, I'm not too concerned about it. This game for me wasn't a huge game to attack. So if I have to swerve off a few things, if the forecast gets a little bit worse as the game gets closer, it's not a huge deal for me.
Yeah, and I'm with you. I think this game's not really an intriguing option as far as just DFS goes in general. So if it did wash out, it really wouldn't be a bother to me. Obviously, the Jays bats always have some upside. Ventura very inconsistent against both sides of the plate, but so is this Jays offense. I mean, it's just such a boomer bust team. It's not like they always put down a collective effort. Talking on the DK pod, and it was a lot of 1-for-4 with the homer, or a lot of low floor games where it's over 3, 1-for-4 with a walk or something like that. It hasn't been the consistent, high floor Jays that it was last year.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. You look at both these offenses compared to what they did last year, and they both are somewhat completely different. You look at Toronto, like you said, they're more of a boomer bust rather than being a more consistent offense. And in Kansas City, I know they've had some injuries, but they've just haven't been doing what they usually have been doing towards starting pitchers. So to me, this is just a game where I'm probably staying away. The prices aren't too high for me. Of course, Donaldson and Encarnacion are, but other than that, I can see why people were to play guys out of Toronto going up against Ventura. But other than that, I really don't see too much.
No, I don't see it either. And on the Royal side, I mean, if there's one guy I might take a look at is Eric Hosmer at 2,900. And Stroman struggled a little bit with left-handers this season, but outside of that, it's pretty much Hosmer for me just because of the price tag below 3K. But yeah, I'm with you. I think this game doesn't really have a lot of appeal.
Yeah, absolutely. I sort of don't mind playing Stroman here. He's looked a little bit better. And the game is at Kauffman Stadium, so that might help him a bit. But other than that, it's not too much.
Yeah, definitely. And the 77 price tag's not bad either.
Yeah, it's really cheap. So, I mean, it's no Bundy price, but I don't mind 7,700.
Yeah, definitely. Braves and Cardinals next year. Adam Wainwright versus Mike Foltynewicz, and Wainwright's a guy who I'm just fading completely here. I know it's against the Braves, and obviously, people are always drawn to matchups against the Braves, Padres, Phillies. That tier down there. But overall, at that price, I'll stay away, and I'd rather go with either guys like Stroman or Bundy for basically 2,000 cheaper.
Yeah, we talk about this a lot. It always seems like there's this one decent or good starter on every slate that's just priced just random and just doesn't fit with what you really want. There's either guys lower that have a little bit more upside potential or a little bit safer floors, a little bit higher, and that's kind of what we see with Wainwright today. So I kind of agree with you, even though it is Atlanta. They still have a bunch of lefties, and they're just a pesky team that sometimes can really ruin a starting pitcher's performance.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm not using Atlanta. I think the only one I might use is Freddie Freeman, just because there's always some upside there for a cheap price. And he just always goes completely overlooked. And I think even more so today against Wainwright. But look at Wainwright. I mean, he's had his ups and downs. I mean, over his last couple of starts, even after a really good stretch there. I think he's kind of a guy you can kind of target in GPP still just because really, I mean, you're going to get a lot of low ownership plays.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely see that. So I don't mind that, but just in general, it's really not the cool, nice price tag that you want from them.
Yeah. And as far as the Cardinals go, I mean, this is obviously a popular team to look at today, going up against Fulton-Newitz. I mean, lefties against them, 383 WOBA, but 2.01 home runs per nine. And obviously Carpenter, if he's in the lineup, I know he left the game last night. Him and Brandon Moss, if Matt Adams is in there, are certainly all really strong options.
No, absolutely. All the lefties you can find out of this Cardinals team, just throw them in, especially Moss, especially Adams. So I really like this game just because Fultonevich is really awful against lefties. We saw that last year, and even this year, he's not good. And away from Turner Field, he also isn't that great. So I definitely gonna see the lineup and just check the lefties off and throw them in.
Yeah, definitely, and they're all at really solid prices. I mean, Carpenter's kind of the only expensive one, but Moss's price tag is definitely reasonable. Adams is certainly reasonable, so I'm really okay with using the Cardinals as a pretty good core today.
Yeah, absolutely. And even Carpenter, yeah, it's 4,000. But if you pair him with Moss and even Adams, or even a lot of cheaper options, it's easy to fit him in.
Yeah, it definitely is, and given the fact that there are cheaper prices, I mean, Cole's not that expensive, so you can definitely fit him in there. Or if you are going with a Bundy, that leaves you a ton of salary left over.
Absolutely. Keep an eye on. Oh no, never mind. Keep going. Sorry,
Uh,
it's just one of those mornings.
as far as Piscotty and Holiday go, I mean, they're reasonably cheap outfielders, and Holiday's starting to kind of come around a little bit more. Piscotty's certainly in a little bit of a slump against right-handed pitching, but I think Fulton-Newitz is one of those guys you can definitely kind of, take a shot on.
Yeah, absolutely. He's really been awful against lefties, but even righties, he's just kind of so-so. So I really don't mind those two guys that you mentioned.
Yeah, definitely. So that's going to wrap things up with the FanDuel Punch Out. Be sure to check out DaveFantasyCafe.com for all our great tools and content.